My first experience with a true 3D game world was 1996's Tomb Raider. I couldn't have been more than 10 minutes into the first Peruvian level, already awed by the stylish opening cutscene and the thrill of gunning down pixelated bats with Lara's dual pistols, when I stumbled upon what I thought was a precipitous cliffside path. As I approached the crudely textured edge that dropped off into the void, the shroud of darkness that obscured the distant terrain was slowly pushed back, revealing what I first thought were distant mountain slopes and cyclopean rock arches. For a moment, I just sat there listening to the whistling wind and eerie echoes, fully immersed. Of course, a minute later I would realize my imagined cliff was just a few sloped polygons leading to the cave floor. Well, in time, I'd come to appreciate the rendering techniques used to avoid placing too great a load on the PS1's limited hardware. Regardless, it was, and remains, one of my most pivotal gaming experiences. Having grown up playing side-scrolling games on an NES, before moving on to isometric RPGs and RTS games on my PC, my mind ran wild with what else I might expect to see during my playthrough. Although Tomb Raider ultimately proved more restrained than I expected, it was the first time I could truly appreciate the potential of exploring and navigating a virtual 3D space. My mind frequently drifted back to that memory during a dozen of unexpectedly compelling hours with the lightly remastered and undeniably archaic Blade of Darkness port, as I pondered, over and over again, why navigating modern game worlds really feels like such an engaging and immersive experience. I'll start with an overview of the game, as I'm guessing few people have heard of it, let alone played it. Developed by Rebel Axe Studios, many of you would go on to form Mercury Steam, it's a third-person action-adventure that released on PC in 2001 as Severance, Blade of Darkness, to a mostly positive reception. The remaster is exactly the same game, but now runs in widescreen at higher resolutions and frame rates, while offering HDR tone mapping, basic motion blur, and overblown bloom lighting. Like console ports of many older PC games, the perfunctory but awkward gamepad support makes for more intuitive and tactile inputs, but it can't obscure the fact this was designed around mouse and keyboard inputs. What surprised me was how good Blade of Darkness can still look, if you keep your expectations in check, given the impressive sense of scale, thick atmosphere, and simple yet broody soundtrack. Sure, the environments are chunky and the mist-obscured rendering distance obvious, but a highlight are the striking stencil shadows, coupled with limited dynamic lighting, which often lets you spot enemies by their shadows before you see them. The devs were also clearly proud of their water reflections, and made it a dominant visual theme. When it comes to movement and combat, character models are chunky but distinctive, and animation variety is limited. However, it still has a satisfying dismemberment mechanic, persistent bodies, and gore splattering every surface after a battle. The premise is suitably epic yet cliched. An ancient evil is stirring and bringing strife to the world, an evil that can only be defeated by collecting magical runes and gemstones to unlock a mythical sword. To its credit, Blade of Darkness offers 4 lengthy and enjoyable introductory missions, one for each hero, each set in a different location, with a distinct atmosphere, doling out a little more backstory and world building. Unfortunately, the subsequent chapters rely on narrated map screens and short, crude cinematics that play out the same regardless of who you pick. Rather than individuals with personal quest lines, they begin to feel like interchangeable classes, though that's no bad thing. It's not just a case of a reskinned character and a new weapon set, as each has their own attributes. Think size, speed, hit points, and even hitboxes, along with different armor upgrades and a preferred fighting style. The focus is almost entirely on melee, with the Knight and Dwarf offering durable tank-like classes, while the Barbarian and Amazon are nimble damage dealers that need to avoid blows. Now, I've seen many fans argue Blade of Darkness is an early example of Souls-like design, but with that classic PC ability to save anywhere, it's more of an unforgiving trial-and-error action game, even if it has an annoying stamina mechanic and bizarrely proportioned dragon circling a fort in one level. If anything, it feels like an evolution of 1998's Death Trap Dungeon, with the high difficulty a result of sadistic design coupled with floaty controls that feel like they belong in an FPS game, just with the view pulled back. With your hero of choice, you explore, level by level, abandoned or overrun cities, forts, mines, ruins, and tombs, on the hunt for key items or switches that'll open the way forward towards some MacGuffin you're after. Complicating matters are crude platforming sections, deadly traps, and hordes of foes that include traitorous humans, corrupted orc tribes, several variants of the undead, and a selection of recurrent bosses. To deal with threats, Blade of Darkness features a surprisingly complex but poorly explained combat system. It seems simple, with only an attack, block, and dodge input, but modifying these with directional inputs is key. Weapons all have unique combo patterns. Think sweeping crowd control, overhead strikes, low blows, and charge strikes, all triggered by holding the attack button and alternating directional inputs. All weapons also offer a trade-off between damage, a defense penalty, and stamina cost. So a powerful blade might fell an opponent in 1 or 2 strikes, but missing too many swings can leave your hero doubled over, panting, and vulnerable. The combination moves are more than optional flourishes, as understanding each strike pattern is essential to hitting small and nimble enemy types and bypassing shields or armor. One good sidestep and a high horizontal swipe can behead a lesser minion, while landing a full 3 or 4 hit combo can cut down even the toughest foe. Of course, the same holds true for you, so you need to be aware of which direction you're strafing or rolling towards, relative to the enemy's weapon arm and their swing. Looping back to my opening statement, Blade of Darkness's high-stake combat is fun enough, but it doesn't evolve significantly. Your hero grows in strength, gaining stamina and health points, and you acquire more powerful weapon variants, but the same applies to your foes to keep things balanced. Once I had an understanding of the mechanics and found my weapon preference, combat settled into a familiar rhythm, and it was really the thrill of exploring new and diverse environments that kept me going. It helps a lot that Blade of Darkness comes from an era when building massive worlds was hard, so verticality and density were far more important than breadth. Levels often make use of almost every corner of the map, often across multiple levels, even if it can feel contrived. Blade of Darkness features a nice mix of locations inspired by European, Middle Eastern, and even South American civilizations, often evoking a strong sense of isolation and vulnerability, not dissimilar to the original Tomb Raider. But there are downsides like limited assets and repeating room layouts. That said, every location still feels suitably handcrafted and packed with secrets. If you keep an eye out for climbable ledges, survivable drops, some risky jumps, and distant switches, you'll often discover secret runes, powerful weapons, and potions that can trivialize tough encounters. It rewards those that explore thoroughly by reducing their reliance on combat mastery alone. Of course, in 2023, many of these diversions look short and underdeveloped, but Blade of Darkness lacks both the precision movement of a game like Tomb Raider and the forgiving assists of modern titles. Simple tasks like stringing together long jumps, crossing wide beams, or dodging insta-kill traps are all tense affairs, though the ability to save anywhere somewhat undermines the tension. It's archaic and clunky, sure, but the environments are also easily readable. You can always stop and survey the terrain to spot half-hidden side paths, potential traps, and likely ambush spots. In contrast, secret hunting in too many modern games boils down to tedious and systematic exploration of a large space in which geometry and topography are mechanically meaningless and the scenery all blurs together. If I had to guess, I'd say the reason for this is both technical and by design. Firstly, modern gaming worlds are more geometrically complex and natural in design, while characters have a far greater animation complexity. They can run, mantle, and climb through environments fluidly, which makes artificial barriers more obvious and frustrating to players. That leads into the second point, which is ease of play considerations. Outside of dedicated genres, like platformers or puzzlers, developers tend to make getting around intuitive and fluid to the point of forgettable, presumably so you can focus on the core mechanics like combat. As a result, I found the Blade of Darkness remaster weirdly compelling and fresh by virtue of being 20 years behind the curve. By 2001 standards, the gameplay loop was enjoyable yet unremarkable. In 2023, it feels positively archaic, and yet almost novel again. I completely understand the thrill of unhindered traversal, but I miss the methodical nature of exploring early 3D game worlds. If you're remotely curious about it, the Blade of Darkness remaster is well priced for what it is, and will no doubt be on sale for even less soon enough. If nothing else, I'd recommend tackling the 4 diverse prologue levels with each character to get a feel for it, as they provide an enjoyable microcosm of the game as a whole. From there, you can decide if I'm just wallowing in nostalgia, or if it's worth pushing forward.
And with me will be someone even more powerful than I. Our victory is assured because my lord is invincible.
If you've got this far, please consider giving the video a like and maybe subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow.